In the early 70s, if you wanted to play it safe, you bought a Mustang. If you wanted to follow the crowd, you chose a Camaro. But if you were the kind of guy who refused to follow the beaten path and wanted a machine that could make the men running the big three eat your dust, you drove an AMC Javelin AMX. While Ford Motor Company and General Motors were pouring millions of dollars into advertising and product development, American Motors Corporation had little more than pride and a burning desire to prove they could build a true monster of their own. So, how did a company best known for mild-mannered Rambler family cars for the suburban driveway end up producing one of the most muscular and aggressive pony cars ever to roll across American asphalt? How did they step into the Trans Am arena? Not just to participate, but to dominate. To understand why the AMC Javelin AMX was so special, we have to go back to the position of American Motors Corporation in the late 1960s. AMC was not an empire. They didn't have towering glass headquarters in Detroit, unlimited R&D budgets, or the luxury of surviving several losing years in a row like Ford Motor Company or General Motors. In the eyes of many Americans at the time, AMC was associated with practical, fuel-conscious Rambler models, cars built for middle-class suburban families. But when the first-generation Javelin debuted in 1968, it was a declaration AMC had a pony car too. Still, it wasn't until the second generation from 1971 to 1974 that everything truly changed. This was no longer a coupe trying to squeeze into a crowded segment. It was a statement of design and performance. And most importantly, AMC brought the AMX name, previously a standalone two-seater performance model, into the Javelin lineup as its highest performance version. At the same time, AMC began investing seriously in its Trans Am racing program. They understood that if they wanted their design and engineering to be taken seriously, those elements had to be tested in the harshest possible environment. It was here that the partnership with Roger Penske's racing team and the brilliant driver Mark Donohue opened an entirely new chapter, one whose influence would eventually seep into every bodyline and every chassis detail that followed. When 1971 arrived, the AMC Javelin AMX wasn't simply refreshed. It was reborn with an entirely different design language. Bold, muscular, and shaped with real aerodynamic intent. Richard Teague understood that AMC didn't have the budget to get it wrong more than once. So, from the very first sketch, the car had to make a powerful impression. And that impression came from its proportions. The body was wider, lower, music, with rear shoulders that flared outward in a provocative stance. Those signature bulging wheel arches were not just styling cues. They made the car look as if its weight was shifted rearward, ready to dig in and launch. Inspiration from the AMX3 project, with its European flair, was transformed into something distinctly American, aggressive, and purposeful. The front end is where that personality reveals itself most clearly. The wire mesh grille juts forward like a combat shield. The hood stretches long, low, and sloping, guiding the eye straight toward the sharply raked windshield. The entire front profile was optimized to reduce drag at high speeds, something not every early 70s pony car truly paid attention to. From the side, the character line running along the body creates a continuous play of light, making the Javelin AMX look like it's in motion even when standing still. The rear was cut cleaner and tighter, and in later versions, the small rear spoiler wasn't just there for decoration. And when we talk about the heart, we're not talking about the smaller toned-down versions built to satisfy the increasingly strict insurance climate of the early 70s. We're talking about the 401 Cubic in V8, cast iron, and fire. In its strongest early configuration, the 4001 produced around 330 horsepower under the gross rating system and up to 430 feet of torque. But for those who have actually gripped the wheel, the The numbers on paper never tell the full story. What gave the 4001 its reputation wasn't just horsepower. It was the nearly flat torque curve, pulling hard right from the lower RPM range. You didn't have to wind it out to 6,000 revolutions per minute to feel the power. Music, just ease into the throttle at 2,500 revolutions per minute, and the car would press you firmly into the seat back. At a time when many competitors were already being strangled by lower compression ratios and new emissions regulations, the 401 still carried the raw muscle spirit of the late 60s. That power reached the pavement through two highly respectable transmission options. For those who demanded absolute control, the 4-speed Borg-Warner T10 manual paired with a Hurst shifter delivered a purely mechanical experience. Every gear change was a firm, decisive click. Metal meeting metal with no ambiguity. And if you chose the Shift Command Automatic, essentially the legendary TorqueFlite 727 that AMC sourced from Chrysler, you were getting one of the most durable drivetrains ever built in America. The kind of transmission drag strip regulars joke about. You'll destroy the car before you destroy it. When paired with the right rear axle ratio, the 401 didn't just make the Javelin AMX quick on paper. It surged forward with a completely different sensation. Not the sharp, frantic punch of an oversized big block. This was thick, steady, relentless power. Like a massive wave rolling in with no intention of stopping. When you step inside the AMC Javelin AMX, you don't feel like you're sitting in a typical early 70s coupe. You feel like you're dropping down into a cockpit built for combat. The twin canopy dashboard, its signature dual cowl design, wraps around the space in front of the driver. The two raised pods rise like a set of targeting sights, separating the gauge cluster and center controls from the rest of the cabin. This isn't the flat, stretched-out dash you'd find in many pony cars of the era. It was inspired directly by fighter jet cockpits, where every piece of information must sit in the right place, in the right line of sight, at the right moment. In front of the driver sits the rally gauge cluster, highlighted by the tick-tock, a design that combines a tachometer and a clock within the same display. At 120 mph, with the tach needle climbing and the 401 V8 roaring ahead of you, there's no time to look down searching for information. One quick glance is all it takes. Every vital reading right there under control. The knobs and switches are angled toward the driver, rather than spread evenly across the dash. The thick three-spoke steering wheel feels substantial in your hands, and the Hurst shifter rises from the floor like a pure mechanical control lever. When you grip it, you feel metal, not glossy plastic. And more importantly, you don't sit on the Javelin AMX. You sit down inside it. The seats are low, the seat backs hug your body, and the window line sits higher relative to the seat height, creating a sense of security and focus. Compared to many first-generation pony cars, music, where you feel like you're perched on a chassis with a body built up around you, the Javelin AMX creates an enclosed, intimate space, one that feels deliberate and completely under control. The Javelin AMX used a front suspension equipped with a large sway bar to reduce body roll when diving into hard corners. Out back, AMC didn't abandon the traditional leaf spring setup, but they refined it. The rear leaf springs were paired with torque links to control axle movement under heavy throttle. This was critical. Many muscle cars of the era suffered from axle hop. The rear axle bouncing uncontrollably under hard launches or when powering out of a corner. The Javelin AMX significantly reduced that behavior, keeping the rear tires planted instead of skipping across the pavement. And you may not know this, but AMC's V8 engine blocks were cast with a significantly higher nickel content than many of their contemporaries. The result was thicker cylinder walls, greater rigidity, and superior wear resistance. When you see an AMC 401 sitting on an engine stand, You can feel its weight and density. On top of that, every 401 engine came equipped with a forged steel crankshaft and forged connecting rods as standard. While many big block engines from General Motors or Ford Motor Company at the time used cast crankshafts in numerous versions, AMC chose the more expensive route for the 401. Forged steel handles torsional stress better, holds up more reliably at high RPM, and greatly reduces the risk of cracking when you begin increasing power. That means you can spin this 401 higher than the factory recommended limits, without constantly fearing that the block will come apart. It means that when you install a hotter cam, raise the compression ratio, or rework the carburetor, the foundation underneath is still strong enough to handle it. Whether by accident or by design, AMC created one of the most overbuilt engine blocks of the entire muscle car era. And I truly love their rebellious spirit. But over the years, there's been one recurring illness that anyone who has ever owned a Javelin knows all too well. Rust in the cowl area, right beneath the windshield. AMC's water channel design allowed rainwater to collect inside that cavity. Over time, especially in states with wet winters or heavy road salt use, that trapped moisture would quietly eat away at the metal, and by the time you discovered it, it was often too late. The front floor pans, both driver and passenger side, could already be rotting from the inside out. This isn't the kind of damage you notice while washing the car. It hides, it waits, and it's one of the reasons finding an AMX that's still solid, one that hasn't undergone major floor pan surgery, is becoming increasingly rare. Then there's the interior. That beautiful twin canopy dashboard, the very symbol of its fighter jet cockpit, has a fatal weakness. The quality of plastic AMC used in the early 70s wasn't exceptional. Under the brutal sun of Texas or Arizona, the material becomes brittle and begins to crack over time. Fractures form around the gauge cluster, spreading outward like spider webs. Finding an original uncracked dash today is almost like searching for gold in the sand. And then we have to talk about the V8's oiling system. The AMC 4001 was known for its durability, but when pushed to sustained high RPM, especially in racing conditions or during extended high-speed highway runs, the factory oil system could experience pressure drop at the rear cylinders. Not because the design was weak, but because the oil passages weren't fully optimized for maintaining high RPM over long periods. Longtime AMC enthusiasts all know about the oil system mod, a nearly mandatory upgrade if you want to extract the full potential of this engine with peace of mind. At this point, you might think you already know everything about the AMC Javelin AMX, but this is where the story becomes even more interesting because there are details that even many longtime muscle car enthusiasts have never heard before. In 1971, at the height of the muscle car era, the Alabama Highway Patrol made a bold decision. Instead of choosing traditional full-size sedans, they ordered approximately 132 Javelin AMX models, equipped with the 401 cubic inch engine for high-speed pursuit duty. Imagine that sight on the highways of the American South. Music, a wide-bodied pony car growling with 401 cubic inches under the hood, lights flashing as it surged into triple-digit speeds in pursuit. Years before the Mustang SSP would appear, the Javelin AMX had already become one of the first pony cars widely used for high-speed law enforcement duty. Then came one of the strangest collaborations in Detroit history. Starting in 1972, customers could order an interior option designed by French fashion designer Pierre Cardin. Yes, a muscular American muscle car roaring with a 401 V8 could be dressed in sweeping bands of red, plum, white, and silver flowing from the seats all the way up to the headliner. Geometric patterns stretched across the cabin as if a haute couture runway had been stitched into steel and gasoline. It sounded outrageous, but it also reflected AMC's fearless willingness to experiment. And then there's a detail reserved for those who truly understand Trans Am. The horseshoe-shaped rear spoiler, commonly known as the ducktail, on certain special versions, wasn't just for looks. Mark Donohue was directly involved in its design to generate real downforce once the car pushed past 100 mph. In a racing environment, a few pounds of downforce can mean the difference between gripping the pavement and washing wide through a corner. But to legalize that component for Trans Am competition, AMC was required to produce at least two 500 streetcars equipped with it under homologation rules. Although the AMC Javelin AMX never truly threatened the Mustang or Camaro in terms of sales, units sold are not the only measure of greatness. From 1971 to 1974, total annual production for the entire Javelin line remained under 30 cars per year, a modest figure when compared to the hundreds of thousands rolling off the assembly lines of Ford Motor Company or General Motors. But on the racetrack, the story was entirely different. Under the disciplined leadership of Roger Penske's racing team and the cool, calculated talent of Mark Donohue, AMC accomplished what many once thought impossible, capturing the Trans Am Championship 2 consecutive years in 1971 and 1972. They defeated the very giants of Detroit on the Giants' own battlefield. It wasn't just a victory for a car, it was a victory for a philosophy that a small company with enough focus and enough courage could bring down corporations with budgets many times its size. Music. And with every championship trophy they carried home, AMC's image began to change. They were no longer the modest family car company. They were champions. Yet, like many other muscle car legends, the Javelin AMX could not escape the storm of history closing in. In the early 70s, tightening emissions regulations began choking compression ratios and horsepower. The 1973 oil crisis forced Americans to look at fuel consumption in gallons instead of cubic inches. Insurance premiums for high-performance cars skyrocketed, especially for younger drivers. The world was changing, and the era of pure muscle was beginning to fade. In 1974, the Javelin AMX quietly came to an end. But sometimes it is precisely the ending that creates the legacy. Today, an original AMX 4001 with matching numbers and a solid body commands a level of rarity far beyond many Mustangs or Camaros from the same era. At auctions like Mecum Auctions or Barrett-Jackson, the Javelin AMX is no longer the budget-friendly choice it once was decades ago. It is hunted as a true unicorn, rare, distinctive, and representing a branch of history not everyone once believed in. So, how many of you out there have ever felt your back pressed deep into the seat of a car powered by a 401? Or maybe you've tried changing spark plugs on an AMC engine and felt like swearing a little. Share your stories down in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to hit subscribe so we can keep the spirit of these muscle machines alive. See you in the next video.